May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always pleasing to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. The author Henry Nouwen, in his book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, first encountered Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son as a poster tacked to the office door of a friend and colleague. He found himself immediately drawn to it. At that time, in 1983, Nouwen had just spent 6 exhausting weeks lecturing to Christian communities across the United States, calling them to do anything they could to prevent war and violence in Central America. He was immediately drawn to the body of the younger son resting against his father. In his book, Nouwen says, after a long, self-exposing journey, the tender embrace of father and son expressed everything I desired. I was indeed the son, exhausted from long travels. I wanted to be embraced. I was looking for a home where I could feel safe. Reflect for a moment about thoughts or feelings you may have as you encounter the painting. For Nouwen, it was the hands, the old man's hands, as they touched the boy's shoulders, that reached him in a place where he had never been reached before. To understand the compassion, we must first understand the reality behind it. Before this young son returned home, he left. Our familiarity with this story and the brevity with which Luke presents it may minimize what occurred. Kenneth Bailey, in his book, Poet and Peasant, Through Peasant Eyes, a Literary and Cultural Approach to the Parables, helps us to understand the brashness of this act of the young man, asking his father for his inheritance. For over 15 years, Dr. Bailey traveled from Morocco to India, Sudan to Turkey, inquiring of residents about the implications of the son's request for his inheritance. Again and again, he received the same responses, indicating it simply would not have occurred, because such a request would mean that he wanted his father to die. He is saying to his father, I simply cannot wait for you to die. It is a heartless act that rejects all the values and traditions of the home and community in which he was raised. This is the child who is resting in the arms of his father. His father's arms are the arms of compassion that surround him. If we look at the life of Rembrandt, it's easy to see the parallels between him and the younger son. Biographers describe Rembrandt as an arrogant young man convinced of his own genius, whose main concern was money, with little regard for others. His self-portraits reflect this arrogance and affiliation for the high life. At the age of 30, he painted himself with his wife Saskia as the lost son in a brothel. Yet this short period of prosperity was followed by grief, heartache, and disaster. Over the period of 7 years, his first 3 children and his beloved wife Saskia died. He lost popularity as a painter and suffered financial difficulty that resulted in his selling all his possessions. Nouwen helps us understand that spiritually, our own leave-taking is more than a historical event bound in time and place. He reminds us, it is a denial of the spiritual reality that I belong to God with every part of my being, that God holds me safe in an eternal embrace. Home is the center of my being, where I can hear the voice that says, "You are my beloved." Nouwen says that many of his own daily preoccupations suggest that he belongs more to the world than to God. A little criticism makes me angry, and a little rejection makes me depressed. A little praise raises my spirits, and a little success excites me. It takes little to raise me up or thrust me down. Nouwen reminds us that God has never pulled back his arms, never withheld his blessings. The Father is always looking for me with outstretched arms to receive me back and whisper again in my ear, "You are my beloved. On you my favor rests." Today, I, like Nouwen, find that there are times that send me into a distant country, looking for the conditional love of the world. I come to worship with a need to rest in the arms of the Father, a need to remember that I am a child of God and compassion awaits. As you gaze at the figure of the younger son, can you see both the starkness of his life and the compassion he is experiencing? Are there times when you have needed and received similar experiences of being the beloved? The poster Nouwen first encountered was cropped. In the original painting, we see that the father and the younger son are surrounded by others. A study by Barbara Joan Hager places the context of Rembrandt's painting into the tradition of the time. She found that the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector and the parable of the prodigal son were closely linked. Her study found that the seated man looking at the returning son is a steward representing sinners and tax collectors, while the standing man looking at the father is the elder son representing the Pharisees. By putting the elder son in the painting as the most prominent witness, Rembrandt goes beyond the biblical text. Rembrandt goes to the spirit of the text. Nouwen writes, "They, the presence of both brothers, help me to see the painting as a work that summarizes the great spiritual battle and the choice the battle demands. By painting not only the younger son in the arms of the father, but also the elder son, who can still choose for or against the love that is offered him, Rembrandt presents me with the inner drama of the soul, his as well as my own." Rembrandt's painting sums up his own spiritual struggle and invites his viewers to make personal decisions about their lives. Rembrandt's bystanders make his painting a work that engages the viewer in a very personal way. When we listen carefully to the words with which the elder son attacks his father in the parable, self-righteous, self-pitying, jealous, Nouwen heard a deeper complaint. It is the complaint that comes from a heart that feels it never received what it was due. It is the complaint that cries out, "I tried so hard, worked so long, did so much, and still have not received what others get so easily. Why do people not thank me, not invite me, not play with me, not honor me, when they pay so much attention to those who take life so easily and so casually?" Nouwen explores the resentment of the older brother, noting that as he expresses this resentment, the father responds, "My son, you are with me always, and all that I have is yours. But it is only right we should celebrate and rejoice, because your brother here was dead and has come to life. He was lost and is found." The father invites the elder son to join him in the joy and the light. We see a figure of a man who stayed home and became lost. He did all the things expected of him, fulfilled all his duties, but increasingly became unhappy on the inside. The older son is lost in his own way. Grief, sorrow, broken relationships, and estrangement, such things can cause one to become unmoored. Rembrandt's painting, as well as Jesus' parable, could have been entitled Lost Sons. Rembrandt had a history that would have given him insight into the elder brother. There are accounts of his goals being more concerned with pleasing his constituents than his art, and more concerned with money than people. Apparently, none of his legal battles and none of his quest for fame left him feeling satisfied. Nouwen relates that as the oldest son in his family, he grew up with a need to please and a score-keeping system of judgment and resentment. Nouwen explores the inability of joy and resentment residing together. That much in the way the elder son could not enter the joy of the father because of his anger, he, Nouwen, found himself always striving to be the best, but at the expense of those around him, which left him feeling dissatisfaction as he had not received his due. Nouwen acknowledges that as an individual, he could not rid himself of these feelings. Nouwen states, "I can only be healed from above, from where God reaches down. What is impossible for me is possible with God. With God, everything is possible." Answering the reaching out of God requires that we step out in faith and trust that we are truly God's beloved. And to complete the circle, trust must be accompanied by gratitude. Resentment and gratitude cannot coexist. The discipline of gratitude is the explicit effort to acknowledge that all that I am and have is given to me as a gift of love, a gift to be celebrated with joy. As resentments melt away, joy takes their place. Is that the lesson of Rembrandt's painting? We, as onlookers, are privy to and invited into a depth of relationship. We are invited into the compassion, the light, and the joy. All we have to do is accept the love. Amen.